The station. At the edge of town, where the houses stopped and the countryside began, was a small train station. Two platforms sat on either side of the tracks. Humans and robots were standing around, waiting for the next train to arrive. Nobody paid attention to our robot as she calmly marched past. When Roz was safely out of sight, she slipped into the woods where Bright Bill was hiding. The goose opened his mouth to speak, but the station bells started ringing. Speeding down the tracks was a passenger train. A whistle blew, the train gently braked, and a minute later it came to a smooth stop at the station. Passengers burst out of the train cars while others stepped aboard. The first 9 cars were reserved for humans and had wide windows and comfortable seats. The only robots allowed in those cars were service robots who brought food and drinks to the human passengers. All other robots were confined to the windowless car at the end of the train. "Where's it going?" whispered Bright Bill as he peeked out from the brush. "The sign says this is the express train to the city," whispered Roz. The goose turned to his mother. "We have to go past the city to get home. This train could save us a lot of time. We should hop on." The robot turned to her son. "I do not think that this is a good idea. It is too risky." "Ma, I watched you walk through town and no one even noticed you. We'll be fine. Let's follow those robots into the last car. I'll find a hiding spot and we'll be in the city before you know it." Roz had questions. How large is the city? Do you know where to go? What if we get lost? "Relax, Ma. My pigeon friend, Graybeak, lives there. She'll be happy to help us." A voice called out from the loudspeaker, and the last couple of passengers hurried along the platform. "I'm going to check it out," said Bright Bill. With a quick flurry of wing beats, he fluttered out from the brush and onto the roof of the last train car. The goose lowered his long neck and looked through the open door. Then he looked back and waved for his mother to join him. A whistle blew and Bright Bill waved faster. Roz had little choice, so she slipped out of the trees and marched onto the platform. "In here, Ma!" Bright Bill pointed down to the doorway beneath him. Everything about this situation made the robot nervous. Her survival instincts were tingling. Roz looked up at her son on the roof, and then she stepped through the train door. But before Bright Bill could flutter in behind her, the door slid closed and the train began to move. Chapter 69, The Train. Our robot felt something like panic as the train pulled away from the station. She wanted to break down the door, leap from the train, and find her son. But what could Roz do? She had to act like a normal robot. She had to pretend that nothing was wrong. The train's car interior was a long, windowless room filled with rows and rows of robots. The robots were all facing forward, all standing still. If not for their softly glowing eyes, you might think they were statues. Some of the robots were perfect and new, but most had scrapes and dents. None more than Razum Unit 7134. Roz walked down the aisle and stood in the last row, and the train started to accelerate. Faster and faster it went until it reached its cruising speed. Then it hummed along the tracks, occasionally swinging left or right as it snaked around a curve. With no windows, Roz could only wonder how far she was traveling. She could only wonder about the scenery outside. Mostly, she wondered about her son. Was Bright Bill okay? How would she find him? Would they ever see each other again? Of course they would. Bright Bill was smart and resourceful. The goose would simply follow the train tracks into the city. Then he would find his pigeon friend, Graybeak, and she would help them reunite. Roz just had to stay out of trouble. Time crawled by. The robots gently swayed with the motion of the train. Finally, there was an announcement from the loudspeaker. "Next and final stop, Center City Station." A whistle blew and the train braked and slowed and came to a smooth stop. The doors slid open and the robots filed out. Chapter 70, The March Through the City. The main hall of City Center Station was enormous. Wide columns stretched up to an arched ceiling. A huge electronic screen flickered with train schedules. The whole place was bustling with humans and robots, and everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. Everyone except Roz. There was our robot, standing still in the station while commuters hurried past. She was trying to calculate her next move, and she had to think quickly. You see, a normal robot would never loiter there for long. Roz needed to do something, anything, and when a crew of Rosm robots marched past in single file, she could think of no better plan than to join the end of the line and pretend to be one of them. She followed the crew through a set of doors, and suddenly they were outside. The city was a blur of activity. Automobiles hummed down the streets, robots marched along the sidewalks, humans talked and laughed and shouted. Buildings towered overhead, and above them airships buzzed across the sky. Airships. For a moment, Roz was dreaming again about how easily she could get home with an airship. But reality came crashing back when a white triangular ship darted over. It was gone in an instant, disappearing behind the rooftops. But that was all it took for the robot's survival instincts to flare. Were the Ricos searching for Roz, or going about some other business? Roz tried to focus on her immediate surroundings. She was still marching behind that crew of robots. With each step, she grew more nervous that they'd notice her tagging along. She wanted to break away, and as they started weaving and shuffling through a crowd of tourists, Roz slowed and stopped, and the robot crew continued on without her. Now Roz was on her own, but she didn't know what to do or where to go. When in doubt, Brightbill had always guided her north, so our robot set off through the city in that direction. While marching northward, Roz passed beautiful boulevards and architecture and gardens and art, and yet she had to ignore it all. She had to act like a normal robot, and a normal robot would never wander through the city admiring beautiful things. Wherever Roz looked, she saw normal robots concentrating on their tasks and on nothing else. They ran errands, delivered food, swept sidewalks, cleaned windows, fixed machines, built glorious structures, and did more jobs than you can possibly imagine. Most walked on 2 legs, but some rolled on wheels or slid up and down the sides of buildings on tracks. The city was a glittering modern metropolis where humans lived in luxury, all thanks to the tireless work of robots. Roz was marching when the sunlight faded and the city lights brightened. She was marching when the humans went in for the night and the robots continued to work. She was marching when the sun came up and the humans filtered out of their buildings. A new day began in the city, and there was Roz, marching north, blending in, anxiously hoping her son would appear.